Okay, now this looks like class in session, and this looks like Mr. Grimes that I need in the game. Um, how you doing tonight, Mr. Grimes?
Doc, I'm doing very well, uh, despite the technical difficulties.
Well, it's always going to be technical difficulties. Like I always try to remind people that my doctorate is not in technology. That is why I keep young people around me.
That's it.
Uh, I knew I had a day of doing well with technology,
Right,
so I knew that I was going to pay for that later.
right.
But I came across, I was looking at one, I'm very thankful that you were available tonight. We missed you this morning. It was a really good
Yeah,
conversation, actually.
yeah, I
About
saw the video.
she was hitting me with the it was ACE. It was
ACEs,
ACEs, yes.
adverse childhood, yeah, events,
Experiences, yes.
experiences. Yes,
I was all over that. That
yeah,
was very good. And then I was going to reach out to you to see if we could get together tonight.
right.
And I saw the questions that you had sent me by way of text, and I
Yes.
said, "This is it. This is it. We need to go no further." Because um, I was texting with a buddy of mine earlier
Uh-huh.
who was telling me he had just finished Martin Luther King Jr.'s last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community.
Hmm.
And he was telling me that, let's see if I can find it. So it was really funny that you would say that. Um, where is it? He said, I sent him a video. He said, "Facts, I just finished reading Dr. King's book today." I sent him this link
Uh-huh.
of the Dr. King video. And he
Right.
said, I just finished reading this book today, and it was Where Do We Go From Here? I said, that was one of my favorite books.
Hmm.
He said, it's a great read. I literally wrapped up reading this book today. I said, good info. I always looked at the civil rights movement as a failure until I read their book.
Hmm.
He said, indeed, I can see that too. Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of
Uh,
1965 eliminated legal segregation, but they didn't address the economic disparities.
yes.
I said the only thing they did was address outward discrimination, toned it down, and all of the structural and necessity or utilitarian aspects of discrimination were left in place, which is economic, which is educational, and those components stayed in place. He said exactly. I said redlining, medicine, education, incarceration, all of those things remained the same. Policing, all of those things were patent, and the civil part was latent. You could see it, you know. Well, maybe I got that reversed. I think patent is on the surface and latent is under there, but you
Underneath.
understand
Yeah.
I'm making. And he said, and that's where civil rights fail. They should have pushed harder for economic reform. I said, no, they needed civil rights, they needed the Civil Rights Act to find out that the problem was not civil. We thought it was these are people who are not civil to us.
Okay.
And it was because once we examined the systems, we learned that this is not about civility. The civility is a what's the word I'm trying when you just worry about what something looks like.
Uh,
Um,
the optic or the
yeah, but it's a particular
uh
word I'm looking for. When somebody just cares about what a woman looks like or how much money you
superficial,
have,
the superficial.
superficial.
Yes.
Yes, the um the the color demonization was the superficial part
Mhm.
of racism.
Right.
The utility of racism is to
Yes.
reduce and limit the access to wealth to a small group. That's what that was for. Okay. And I said it was the civil rights movement. That's how they figured out it was economic, which was why it was a success, which is why we got to read Dr. King's books and not the books that the people that killed him want us to read about it. What we know about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is the version of him that the collective wants us to know. And we have to remember it was the collective that assassinated him.
Yeah.
So we're learning from his enemy about him. No, we need to be reading the books he wrote so we can learn about him from him. I think they said 80% of the books written about the Black Panthers is propaganda
Yes.
by the FBI's information about the movement. So we have to be careful. Like we have to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, because even the movie Spike Lee did, that was a lot of Black people's introduction to um, Malcolm X. But when you read the book, it, it wasn't a biographical representation or a videography of the book. So you really need to read the book. But he said that's a valid point. Civil rights movement initially focused on legal and civil rights, but as leaders like Martin Luther King realized, economic inequity was a deeper issue. That's why MLK's later efforts, like the Poor People's Campaign, aimed at addressing poverty, fair wages, and economic justice, not just desegregation, the power structure, could grant civil rights, but real change required economic empowerment, which was and still is much harder to achieve. I said, correction. You have to look at his section on Black power in that book, in Chaos or Community. Where do we go from here? Martin Luther King didn't figure it out. Stokely Carmichael did.
Hmm.
Stokely Carmichael, it was the Black Power movement that Martin Luther King Jr. was against,
Yes.
that developed within that movement of the nonviolent people that was tired of people putting hands on. Because you got to remember, this is a decade into the game. These new young folks, these new educated young folks, is like, no, you ain't pouring nothing in my hair. You're not putting your hands on me unless you're gonna get some hands put back on you. So
Yes.
it's in that this upheaval is coming, and he begins to learn from this young movement. So I was like, don't this. And if people don't know who Stokely Carmichael is, that is Kwame Ture. He
Yes.
changed his name as he
As
left the
what?
country. He was one of the
Yes.
people that was put in political exile.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I said civil rights movement disqualified the outward appearances of racial discrimination, not the critical race theory. The outward appearances, not the systems. Critical race theory are the systems that produce the same outcome. A perfect example in 1865, Black people owned 0.5% of the nation's wealth, a half a percent.
Yes.
In 2025, Black people own 0.5% of the nation's wealth.
Yes.
So that's why I tell people that change is not synonymous to progress.
Right.
Things are different,
Yes.
but the numbers are the same.
Right. Meaning
So
that we should have more because the nation has more.
we do have more.
Right.
Think about it.
Yes.
If you got 5% of a dime, you're gonna have more if you have 5% of a dime.
Right.
You got more,
Right.
but it's the distribution
Right.
based on talent, Is the distribution based on merit? Is the distribution based on population? In all of those things that have changed, merit, intelligence, population, talent, uh, education, all those things have changed since 1865 to 2025, which is 160 years. Why hasn't the percentile wavered or changed?
Right. So in that regard, would it be a systematic approach for us not to excel in certain areas? Or I'm not gonna say certain areas, I would say overall.
It definitely is. All we have to do is
Yeah,
look at the United States legal system.
right, right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's what I was about. Yes.
right. The laws on education. And then you know what else is a factor in that?
What's that?
Price.
Yes.
State universities were free when they started.
Mm-hmm.
You know when they started really charging for state universities? After Brown.
What? And it's funny that you mention it, right? Because I don't know how familiar you are. There's a paper written by a guy by the name of Frederick L. Hoffman, right? It's called Race Traits and Tendencies of the American Negro. It was published in about August 1896. Now he talks about how
1896, that
1896.
Is that the same year or the year after Plessy?
Ooh, was it? That's the same year, right?
I believe so. I don't want to lie. 1896. I'm a man. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
it's the
So
same year.
okay, we just
So
to give
check
some
this out.
historical context. Okay.
So check this out. Frederick L. Hoffman, which worked for he was an analyst for Prudential Insurance Company, right? Mm-hmm. And he writes in his paper that it was never designed for the Negro to have equal access to healthcare.
No.
It's never designed for that, right? And matter of fact, he states in his paper that if the same trends continue, that within 2 to 3 generations, that they would eliminate a large portion of the African American population because of denial of health care. Now check this out. Under Teddy Roosevelt, there was a national plan for universal health care. It was denied. And under FDR in the 1930s, same concept. Same, and we think of the FDR era as being equal access to equal access to employment opportunities for all people, black, white, whatever the case may be. But there was another medical proposal put on the floor for universal health care, denied. Even under Truman era in 46, same thing, denied. And so what happened was we started to see this thing called a deductible arise in terms of medical health care. And that when individuals went to the doctor, they had to pay what? 20% of their initial cost. Well, what happened? Most black folk could not afford 20% of the deductible. So you had disparities in healthcare. You had chronic illnesses. You had deaths because you couldn't pay. And so the system perpetuated itself until, and which is actually fulfillment of, again, Mr. Hoffman's projections of what would happen. And so those things continue to go on. What's that?
Now, that brings me to the question that you asked. You asked 2 really, really good questions.
Yes, sir.
What have we learned from the civil rights movement and other efforts of Black sovereignty? And who has the power and or plan to make Black independence happen. You tell me which one of those three you want to address in what order. What have we learned from the civil rights movement? What have we learned from other movements of Black sovereignty?
Yes.
And who has the plan and power to actually make it happen?
Right.
I'm ready for any of them. You all up in my area right now.
Doc, I posed a question to you, but I'm gonna go ahead and give mine.
I'm saying we can start with any one you want. You pick which one you want to do.
Right. I'm gonna give my rendition of my fledgling understanding of history, although I'm a history teacher on a public education setting, right? So if I look back over time, and I lead up to the civil rights movement, right? And we look at that, and correct me if I'm wrong. You tell me you understand. I think at that particular time, we really thought we arrived in terms of equal access, politically, economically, and socially. I think that they tried to.
I think that's a good assessment.
They try to make us believe that we had arrived at that particular time. So
we had the most reason to believe that at that time. Up until that point, we had the most reason.
Yes, we did. I just don't think we demanded enough. I just don't think we put forth, because I still think that, because you're still talking about Martin drawing closer to his end in terms of life. We're still talking about the disparities between Black and white in terms of economics, education. We were developing into the nation that we thought we should have been.
Okay.
I just don't think after Martin and after Malcolm and after a lot of African American leaders, I just don't think we banded together enough to where we were willing to sit down and put our collective minds together and hash some things out. When you start killing off your leaders, that causes chaos and it causes disarray. But whether it be on a state, whether it be on a federal, state, or local level, sometimes I just don't think we demanded enough from the political forces.
When you say we didn't demand enough,
yes,
what do you mean?
I don't think we pushed the envelope enough to where we got the economic and opportunities. We were able to take advantage of even the educational opportunities. Although out of the civil rights movement, we got Title IX, which really benefited white women probably more than anybody else.
Affirmative action numerically benefited white women. But the thing was, we weren't asking for anything. We didn't ask for any repair.
Right.
We asked for the laws that were already in place
to be enforced. Yes.
So when people say we didn't ask enough, we weren't making a request. We were requesting inclusion. We were saying what is in place, follow that. That's all. That's all they were saying. And again, it wasn't a lack of coordination or execution on part of Black people. Medgar Evers, Martin, Malcolm, Hampton. Those people weren't just killed. They were killed publicly.
Yes.
That was a message.
Yes.
We know the FBI killed Fred Hampton.
Yes.
There's no argument in it. That is the only evidence that we have of the United States government assassinating an American citizen, period. Okay?
Right.
Evidence, not saying they ain't did it. That's what we got the evidence for.
Right.
Martin and Malcolm had been under surveillance by the FBI for years. How could how could an assassination happen? And not only did the people get to him, they got away.
Yes.
So um, there was a reason that Adam Clayton Powell and not Adam Clayton Powell, who was the guy on the Jimmy Carter's staff, not Adam Clayton Powell, it was mm, Andrew Young. There's a
Okay.
reason why Andrew Young took that job in the White House that Martin Luther King refused.
Yeah,
There was a
advocate. Yeah.
reason why Jesse Jackson started talking about humanitarianism and the Rainbow Coalition and
Hmm.
including all that militant stuff. When they saw this man, when they saw that outcome, they meant for that to happen. So
Right.
they're like, hey, I got people I'm responsible for. Am I really willing to pay the ultimate price? And it's one thing to pay the ultimate sacrifice, be willing to do it for yourself, but to leave your wife and kids, that's a different situation, right?
Right.
So I don't think it was that Black people did not do enough of anything. I think there was a decision to be made where white America and the federal government drew a line in the sand and said, you do this, we go into war. The fear, the core of the nonviolent movement was we're outgunned.
Right.
There's no way that we can win
You can
a
match that.
violent battle. So that's not the best plan for any type of success. Well, now moral suasion failed. They started killing.
Hmm.
From 1963, Medgar Evers, all the way through. And if you want to throw the Kennedys in there, I don't find the Kennedys being civil rights saviors in any way. But if you want to throw them in there, um, so we have to understand at that time that the United States government set the mark on how far they were willing to go. And the people knew we can't win this. When in the COINTELPRO, the papers about domestic Black organizations was to stop the rise of a new Black Messiah. That is articulated in the COINTELPRO. They did not want another Malcolm. They did not. So they were cutting people off at the knees before they even grew. They killed Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was, I believe, 19
Yeah.
when they killed him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're talking about a boy.
Yes.
If they saw the potential,
The potential. Yes. Yes.
they murdered him in front of people so you can see it.
Yes.
They didn't catch him in an alley. They didn't kidnap him and never to be seen again. Those things were done in public on purpose.
Not only that, it's the whole demonization of the Panther movement after that fact as well.
Well, what happened? What happened after Hampton? The first time the Special Weapons and Tactical Unit
Was developed.
was used
Yes. Was against
was
that.
in Oakland, California,
Yeah. Yeah.
on teenage, mostly women,
Yeah.
because they had locked up most of the guys,
Yes.
and women were in the leadership positions of the Black Panther Party. So we really have to contextualize when it becomes life or death. You have to make a decision, and we do know that the majority of white society has in the past tolerated, if not encouraged or being complicit in, genocide.
Mm.
We're seeing a arguable genocidal movement with Israel and Palestine, and people are looking at it going, not my area. So we know that that's happened on this land with Native Americans.
Right.
And people act as though, well, that was a sacrifice for the good. Well, no.
No.
So now we have to make an intelligent decision. Are we going to allow an apartheid state to start? Are we going to allow a genocidal state to start? How far do we want to push this before? Because rest is part of revolution as well. Sometimes you got to let it cool off and then you come back at it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's a very nuanced period where it looks like, well, they should have just pushed more. We should have just pushed more. Something happened to stop that push. Think about it. They didn't just kill the militant leader. They didn't kill just one leader.
Right.
They killed Martin,
Yes.
nonviolent, Malcolm, uh, the Orthodox Nation or Muslim movement. They killed the Black Power movement, the Panthers. They were killing the NAACP organizational. A lot of times we forget about um, Brother Evers. We forget about Medgar Evers.
Mm-hmm.
He was the organizational NAACP representative. They got all of them in every way that we were coming strong. They killed him, and they killed him publicly. They killed him in front of their family.
Yes, brutally. Yes.
So their kids are messed up. Their wives are messed up. I might be willing to die over a situation. I don't want my kids hurt. I don't want my wife hurt. And those are some major decisions to work. But who has the power?
Which is
Okay.
similar to how we were treated during the course of slavery. I mean, if there was a rambunctious, rebellious leader within the slave quarters, that's what you would do. Yeah, and exactly right, doing the leadership. So
the plan was not new. The plan ain't new now.
It was still exactly right, and it was still being used because it worked.
Was it any different with Kanye West or what's the basketball player that was with Kyrie Irving?
Right.
When they said something that the Jewish community didn't like, Kanye West said, they're going to go after my money.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to keep my money because I protected my money the way that they protected theirs.
They money. Right.
He said, but they go, and in less than a week, they tried to take $1 billion from that man. And guess what? When he got his money back, they didn't publicize that like they did when they tried to take it.
Most definitely. Yeah.
So he said, dude, it's not anti-Semitic if it's true. And they did exactly what he said they were going to do. And no one addressed that. Kyrie Irving lost millions of dollars because this group said, you need to do this list of things for us to ordain you not anti-Semitic.
Right.
Now, here's the problem. No, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should. Well, I guess I can. If you look at the history of the music industry,
mm-hmm.
if you look at the history of housing,
right,
in the 50s, 60s, 70s, if you look at the music industry,
right,
if you look at the particularly entertainment and music,
mm-hmm.
the economic holocaust between the Jewish community And the Black community is very, very bad. But that is something that is not brought up. What's brought up is how the Jewish community came out during the civil rights era to support the civil rights era. But that
Right.
was the same time that they were extracting wealth out of the Black community and being very abusive
Yeah.
economically and
Yeah.
socially to people in the Black. They were the most of those, a lot of those slumlords were Jewish owned. A lot of the unfair contracts that were being executed was being done so in the music industry to you know to this day,
Mm-hmm.
where these young people are signed to these music contracts and they're being taken advantage of because they don't know how this system works. But who has the power and the plan for Black independence?
Well, um, I think we do.
Okay. So what made you ask the
However,
question?
however, I have to preface that by saying, how do we educate the masses to understand what that looks like? I teach a group of kids. I teach a group of kids that some would consider to be socioeconomically deprived.
Okay.
And socioeconomically deprived also means that they are educationally disadvantaged. Again, 80+% of juveniles who are in juvenile services are functionally illiterate. So when I get them, and a large majority of them are Black and brown young men, probably average age 15, 16, who are on the verge of actually dropping out of school. However, they are hungry for knowledge.
Okay.
They just don't have they haven't developed the relationships within the community in order to do that. Now, here's the issue a lot of times with what I have to deal with. Going back to the music industry. The music entertainment industry is so huge in their lives, it almost becomes insurmountable in terms of changing the minds of, or giving them an opportunity to change their minds within their conditions, right? So because they've been conditioned, and I didn't watch the whole podcast today with Dr. Stevens, right? So I will say this, and I don't know how much y'all touched on this. In response to the ACEs and the impact of the ACEs on the development of young people over time, stays with them, oh my gosh, for many, many years, if they do not get the help necessary in order to make those changes. Now, I would venture to say this right here. In the African American community, I think we've always had issues with quote unquote ACEs. I think the support systems dictated how we dealt with those things. Meaning that churches and schools, when you have churches and schools in your communities, I think that sometimes offsets the trauma that was experienced or that is experienced within the community, whether it be outside or inside the community. When you see a disappearance of churches, schools, community service programs, activities through collective organizations, I think you start to see a decline in the moral development and character of individuals, which also has a way of directing where their money is going to go. And so what I've seen is I'm gonna call it the Jordan era. When we start to see a emphasis on how I'm gonna get them new Jordans, as opposed to breaking down the cost of what it took to make them and what it cost to buy them, uh, those things become um, they become obscure to them, right? But when you tell them, look, what you spend on those is not what they cost to make them, and you break those things down, and you start to see, okay, where do you place your esteem? Where do you place your value? Is your value really in the shoe, or is your value within yourself? So my job is to help them understand the value got to be in yourself, because you can only buy the shoe one time. But if you invest in your future, you can buy much more over time. But because they live in these short windows developmentally, I got to capture them at any given time and then build upon those things. Because look, a seed produces after its own kind, right? So I have to get them to understand what the seed can produce if they allow it to grow. Case in point, I did a lesson on compound interest on Friday. Compound, I use a simple principal amount of $5,000 with over 21% interest over time. And I believe that the number wound up, the number that the bank was going to receive was like $19,000 on a $5,000 loan. They were like almost, they were silenced. They were just silenced, thinking that I'm only gonna get hit with this 20% one time. But we start talking about compounding interest over time, a light bulb began to kick in, as if, do I really want to buy them shoes? Do I really want to buy those jeans? Do I really want to buy that shirt? If you don't show them the economic impact along with the social support they can receive because of that, Doc, it's hard because they don't have the skill sets. And so,
well, we got what? Okay, we got 2 minutes,
okay,
and then we can go out and come back if you want to, because I know it's
it's
getting
up to
late
you.
for you. Okay, all right. Well, what we'll do is we'll go out for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
But this is the thing.
Yes.
Garvey said this.
Uh-huh.
The tree starts with the grass, but to be a tree, it got to leave the grass down there.
Yeah.
Everybody is not part of our answer. Garvey said, and I don't need everybody in America to repatriate to Africa. Some of y'all ain't no good here. So what we need to be focused on, and we're gonna in this last 2 minutes on our outro, and then we're gonna talk about, when we come back, who laid the plan for us. We need to be less focused on priming the collective and more focused on selecting the talented. W.E.B. Du Bois had it right. It was just W.E.B. Du Bois wasn't, his character had a problem. He had division issues within race. He had class issues within intelligence.
Right.
But if we put the plan of Du Bois, the plan of Garvey, the plan of Washington, the plan of Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, the courage of Malcolm X, the grassroots of Martin, the inner city protective nature of the Black Panthers. We have the plan in place.
Yes.
Now, when we come back, we're going to get right into what did we learn from the movement and the other Black sovereignty movements, and who it is that actually has that power.
Cool.
All right.
All right. See you in a few.